Now you listen to me. You'll never be as good as your stepbrother. Sure, you've got all the power, but 420, he's got all the parts. He's got ball bearings. And what do you have? An oil film? What a joke. And according to the internet, you can't turn more than 5,000 RPMs without throwing your flywheel and splitting the driver in half. And if we know anything about the internet, they're always right. Oh, you've got a pressurized oil system? Well, you don't even have a direct feed to the crank, so you'll burn your bearings up in no time. And don't even get me started about the premature scoring on your cylinder walls. You make me sick. Welcome back to JW's Backyard. So we've got our 459cc Predator here, and I like to refer to this as Predator's redheaded stepchild because everybody seems to hate this thing. But I'm gonna tell you, I've loved every second of having it. It has a ton of power. It delivers power like nothing I've ever had. And it's just been a ton of fun. But I put an aftermarket filter on it, aftermarket exhaust, and I rejetted it. And we're gonna see how it performs compared to the factory setup. So I took some baseline numbers with my draggy just to see what kind of numbers we got. We've got some 60-foot times, some 0 to 30 mile per hour times, and we're gonna see if those numbers show anything. But I'd actually filmed the intro with the stock setup on. I just didn't like it, so here we are, post-modification. But I'm gonna show you how to install all this stuff. If you already know how to do that, since it's kind of basic, you can go ahead and skip along in the video to the performance portion. But I can already tell you, this thing is way faster with the aftermarket setup. The numbers really don't show it that well, but we're gonna try to crunch the numbers and break them down a little bit to see if we can get an idea of where we're getting that extra performance at. But let's get to work. All right, so I bought a filter and a filter adapter off of Amazon. I think this was like 26 bucks. This is supposed to fit a Predator 420, but it's supposed to fit this as well. There are some other Hondas that this fits, but let's get this factory airbox off and get this thing on. So we got two 10mm nuts here, and I think there's also something holding it from the inside. Yeah, it looks like there is one nut down here under the filter. All right, so you can see that the filter adapter for the Predator 420 fits on the studs for the 459 just fine. But if you look, the threads for the nuts end way before they'd be able to clamp down and get that adapter tight on there. So we're gonna have to add some spacers here to make sure that clamps down good. So I've got some little spacers. These are actually sold at HarborFreight as drill stops, but this actually fits in there just perfect. I gotta go get another one though, and I'm gonna take out the little Allen screw so it doesn't vibrate out and drop in the motor, but this will work perfect for this. And we'll be able to snug that nut down and get some good clamping force. Little bulge out there, and that's gonna fit just fine. And we'll make sure we tighten this little bolt back here just so the bracket that holds the choke arm down doesn't come loose. All right, so let's get the exhaust off. These nuts are 13mm. All right, and I was gonna build an exhaust, but this was on Amazon for 30 bucks. I was kind of questioning the quality. This is from AR Sports, but I mean, it looks like pretty decent quality for the price, and I have to spend a bunch of time making it. So let's get this thing on and see how it works. They say it fits multiple different engines, but it does advertise that it fits this one. And I was questioning if it was going to be big enough. This is a 1 1/4 inch exhaust, but it's plenty big. It looks like it's going to fit the exhaust port perfectly. And it looks like, again, just like with the intake, the threads on the studs don't go far enough to allow the nuts to actually clamp the exhaust flange on. So we'll have to add a spacer here. Or they did include bolts and a gasket. All right, exhaust is on, but we're definitely gonna have to fix that spacer situation. And before anybody says something about me rigging it up, those spacers on the studs are just temporary. We got the studs out, got some bolts in there. All right, so to replace the jet, we need to take this bowl off, and we'll start by undoing this bottom bolt on the carburetor. It's always a good idea to turn your fuel off and crank the engine and let it run until it cuts off, and that'll drain most of that fuel that's still left in the carburetor and reduces the mess significantly. But even if you don't do that, you need to make sure the fuel's off. Otherwise, when you take that bolt out, you're going to drain your fuel tank. But let's get this bottom bolt off, and you'll see a little fuel come out, but that's just what's left over. We're pretty dry here. All right, and there is a little ring that goes around that bolt. Make sure that goes on. It keeps it sealed well. And there is a gasket that seals this bowl. It's actually tucked up in here. So if you put your bowl back on and it starts leaking, that gasket's probably got folded up or is bad. All right, so your jet's up inside this little tube here. And sometimes it's hard to get a normal screwdriver up in there, normal flathead, because they normally have little wings that bulge out on the edges. But this is a cabinet tip screwdriver, and you see it's flat, and these are real helpful for getting up in there and getting those jets out. But we just put it up in here, and you have to be careful because this material is pretty soft, so you don't want to over tighten it or put a lot of force on it, and you want to make sure that that screwdriver is locked down in the groove good. But you're just going to back it off. And there's your jet. So I'm just gonna go with the biggest I have for now, and if it seems like it's running too rich, we can go down in size, but from what I was seeing, we might just be a little too small. All right, so we got our 44, and we'll snug it down, and we'll put our bowl back on. So just got to make sure that that gasket that's seated up in there is still seated in there well, and looking at it, it looks good. We'll get our bowl back on and put our bottom bolt back in. And what I normally do with the vent for the valve cover here is take the tube off the factory intake and just vent it atmosphere. I've never had a problem doing this with a Predator 212. And the little nut for the bracket holding the choke down is a 7mm. All right, so we got the exhaust on, we got our intake on, we got fresh jet. Let's see what this thing will do.
A few moments later.
All right, so I went to test it, and it's cutting out at full throttle. Doesn't seem like it's running rich. It seems more like a lean issue, because when I run it with the choke half open, it runs better. So we're going to order some bigger jets and get them in this thing and see if that fixes the problem. All right, so I ended up having to put a 130 jet in there. Now it actually picks up some speed when you hit the gas instead of just cutting out like it was with the 115. But as far as jets go, you can get little jet kits with all different types of sizes on places like Go Power Sports, OMB Warehouse, BMI Carts. These are the same style and size jets that fit in like a Predator 212 or a Predator 420. They do sell them with different measurement units. So some you'll see, say like a 44, but then you'll see others that say, like this one's a 102.5. But the reasons the numbers are so different, even though those holes are pretty close to each other, you see there's not a big difference, is because one's measured in millimeters and one's measured in inches. So it's just a different unit of measurement for each of those, and there are conversion charts online. I'll see if I can insert one in here. Let's see what this thing will do with the intake and exhaust in the 130 jet. So we've got a chart here with the stock versus the aftermarket setup. And you can see the aftermarket setup is consistently faster than the stock. But the numbers aren't very impressive. Now, as far as driver experience goes, the aftermarket setup feels way, way faster, but the numbers just aren't showing that. If we look at the 60-foot time first, the aftermarket setup is 0.06 of a second faster. Next is the 0 to 30 time, which is pretty much where this gearing set tops out at. The aftermarket setup is a little over a tenth faster. And then I broke it down in a 0 to 10 mile per hour time, 10 to 20 mile per hour, and 20 to 30 miles per hour, just to see if we could figure out where we're gaining this time at. And it looks like most of the time we've saved is from 0 to 10 miles per hour, which is strange because with the aftermarket setup, the cart feels a little slower, at least for the driver. It almost feels like the clutch is slipping a little bit, or it could be that the engine's lost a little bit of torque because it has that freer flowing exhaust and intake. So the numbers are a little confusing based off of what I feel in that 0 to 10 range. But, I mean, usually the numbers don't lie. So I just thought that was interesting how my experience as a driver was a bit different than what the numbers actually showed. But I know some people will point out the difference in temperature between the 2 days. One day was a little cooler, and you can gain power from cooler air. And I also wanted to mention at one point I popped a 140 jet in there thinking I needed a little more fuel, but the 140 was just way too big. The cart ran like crap, and as soon as I popped the 130 jet back in there, it ran way better and was way faster. But this thing is slowly turning into my new favorite cart. If you got any comments or questions, just leave them down below. I'll see you next time.